When a massive blizzard traps a hiker in the deadly Montana wilderness, everyone assumes the worst when they find wolf tracks nearby. But what this scarred lone wolf actually did will shatter everything you thought you knew about these misunderstood creatures. Jack Morrison had always been drawn to the wild. At 30 years old, he'd conquered some of the most challenging trails across the American West, but nothing had prepared him for what would happen on that fateful February morning in the Glacier National Park backcountry. The weather forecast had called for light snow. Nothing a seasoned hiker like Jack couldn't handle. He'd packed his usual gear, thermal layers, emergency food, a GPS device, and enough supplies for what should have been a routine day hike through the pristine Montana wilderness. But Mother Nature had other plans. As Jack laced up his boots that morning, the first flakes were already beginning to fall more heavily than predicted. The wind carried an ominous chill that seemed to seep through his jacket, but Jack brushed off the nagging feeling in his gut. He'd hiked in worse conditions before. Or so he thought. The trail wound through towering pine trees, their branches heavy with accumulated snow. Jack's breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as he navigated the increasingly treacherous path. What had started as a gentle snowfall was rapidly transforming into something far more sinister. Within 2 hours, the storm had intensified beyond all weather predictions. The wind howled through the forest with a ferocity that seemed almost alive, whipping snow in every direction until Jack could barely see 5 feet ahead. The temperature plummeted to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Jack reached for his GPS device, but his heart sank when he saw the screen, no signal. The thick cloud cover and remote location had cut him off from the outside world completely. That's when panic began to set in. Every direction looked the same. The familiar trail markers were buried under rapidly accumulating snow, and the violent wind had eliminated any footprints he might have followed back. Jack was utterly lost in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. Miles away, watching from the shadows of the dense forest, was a creature that had become the stuff of nightmares. He was no ordinary wolf. A massive alpha male with distinctive scars running down the left side of his face, he'd become something of a local legend among the park rangers and nearby townspeople. But not the kind of legend anyone wanted to encounter. For months, this scarred beast had been blamed for a series of livestock attacks on ranches bordering the park. Cattle had been found with wounds that locals insisted could only have come from a large, aggressive wolf. Property owners demanded action, and the mysterious predator had become their prime suspect. The terrifying wolf had also allegedly been spotted near campsites where food had been stolen and tents damaged. Hikers reported feeling watched by predatory eyes from the treeline. Fear had grown into outright hostility toward the lone wolf that seemed to stalk the wilderness like a ghost. Children in nearby towns were warned never to venture into the forest alone. Parents told stories of the scarred monster that could appear without warning, his yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. Local hunters had tried to track him, but the wolf was too clever, too elusive. As the blizzard raged on, Jack stumbled through the snow, his body temperature dropping dangerously low. His fingers had lost all feeling, and his legs felt like concrete pillars. Each step required enormous effort. Hypothermia was setting in. Jack's thoughts became cloudy and confused. He began to hallucinate, seeing shapes and movements in the swirling snow that weren't there. His speech slurred even though no one was around to hear him. The final stage of hypothermia was approaching rapidly. In a moment of clarity, Jack managed to send one last text message from a spot where his phone briefly caught a signal: lost. Storm bad. Can't find trail. Help. The message would save his life, but not in the way anyone expected. Back in town, Jack's emergency contact, his sister Sarah, immediately called Park Rescue Services when she received the cryptic text. Within an hour, a search and rescue team was mobilizing despite the dangerous weather conditions. Ranger Mike Stevens, a 20-year veteran of mountain rescues, knew they were racing against time. In conditions like these, hypothermia could kill within hours. But the storm was so severe that helicopter rescue was impossible, and even ground teams would be risking their lives. "We have to try," Stevens told his team. "Someone's son, someone's brother is out there." As the rescue team prepared their equipment, they studied Jack's last known location on the GPS coordinates from his text message. The area was remote, dangerous, and known to be frequented by wildlife, including the scarred wolf that had terrorized the region for months. When Stevens mentioned the wolf's territory, the mood in the room shifted. Everyone knew about the massive predator and his alleged attacks. If Jack was injured and vulnerable, an encounter with the beast could be fatal. "We need to be prepared for the worst," Stevens warned his team. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Jack had collapsed. His body had finally given out after hours of fighting through the deepening snow. He lay motionless against the base of a massive pine tree, his breathing shallow and irregular. Snow was already beginning to cover his still form. Jack's core body temperature had dropped to critical levels. His heart rate was slowing dangerously. Without immediate intervention, he would not survive the night. That's when the legendary wolf found him. For the first time in this story, locals would later learn his name was Gray. But right now, he was simply the terrifying predator that parents used to frighten children into staying close to home. The wolf had been tracking humans sent through the forest for over an hour. His keen senses had detected Jack long before any rescue team could hope to locate the lost hiker. Gray approached cautiously, his yellow eyes fixed on the motionless figure in the snow. For several minutes, the wolf simply observed. Jack's breathing was barely visible, but he was still alive. Gray tilted his head, studying this vulnerable human who posed no threat. What happened next defied every assumption about wild wolf behavior. Instead of viewing Jack as prey or simply moving on, Gray made an extraordinary decision. The massive wolf approached the unconscious hiker and carefully settled down beside him, pressing his thick fur against Jack's body. Gray was sharing his body heat. The wolf's natural body temperature of around 102 degrees Fahrenheit began to warm Jack's dangerously cold core. Gray positioned himself to shield the hiker from the worst of the wind and snow, creating a natural shelter with his body. But Gray didn't stop there. The wolf began gently licking Jack's face and hands, a behavior that served multiple purposes. The motion stimulated blood circulation in Jack's extremities and helped prevent frostbite. The warmth of Gray's tongue against Jack's skin provided crucial heat transfer. Most remarkably of all, Gray began to howl. The wolf's deep, penetrating howls cut through the storm, echoing across the forest valley. It wasn't a hunting call or a territorial warning. Gray was deliberately making noise to attract attention to their location. He was calling for help. For nearly 3 hours, Gray maintained his vigil beside Jack, occasionally adjusting his position to provide maximum warmth and protection. The wolf's thick winter coat was perfectly designed for these brutal conditions, and he shared that evolutionary advantage with the dying human. Meanwhile, the search and rescue team was making slow progress through the treacherous terrain. The storm had made travel extremely dangerous, and visibility was nearly zero. They followed GPS coordinates and called Jack's name, but the howling wind made communication almost impossible. Then Ranger Stevens heard something that made him stop in his tracks. "Did you hear that?" he called to his partner, straining to listen above the storm. There it was again, the unmistakable sound of a wolf howling, coming from the direction of Jack's last known location. Stevens felt his blood run cold. If Gray had found Jack first, they might already be too late. The rescue team quickened their pace, following the sound through the snow-covered forest. Each howl grew louder and more distinct. Stevens radioed his team, "Wolf sounds are coming from Sector 7. Approach with extreme caution." They expected to find a gruesome scene. What they discovered instead would change everything they thought they knew about the scarred lone wolf. As the rescue team's flashlights cut through the darkness and swirling snow, they spotted movement ahead. Two forms huddled together against the base of a massive pine tree. One was clearly human. The other was unmistakably the legendary Gray. Stevens raised his hand, signaling his team to stop. They were witnessing something unprecedented. The wolf wasn't attacking the hiker. He was protecting him. Gray looked up as the rescue team approached, his yellow eyes reflecting the flashlight beams. For a moment, wolf and humans regarded each other across the snowy clearing. There was no aggression in Gray's posture, no defensive snarling. He seemed almost relieved to see them. The wolf carefully stood and moved a few steps away from Jack, never taking his eyes off the rescue team. It was as if he understood that his job was done, that help had finally arrived. "I've never seen anything like this," Stevens whispered to his partner. "The wolf has been keeping him warm." Jack was barely conscious but alive. His body temperature was dangerously low, but Gray's intervention had prevented it from dropping to fatal levels. The wolf's body heat and the shelter he provided had bought precious time. As the rescue team worked to stabilize Jack and prepare him for transport, Gray remained nearby, watching from the shadows. The wolf showed no signs of fleeing or becoming aggressive. He seemed genuinely concerned about the human he had protected. Before we continue with this incredible story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us share more amazing stories like this one. During the rescue operation, something even more extraordinary was revealed. Ranger Stevens, with 20 years of experience in these mountains, looked more closely at Gray's distinctive scars. The pattern was familiar, triggering a memory from years past. "It can't be," Stevens murmured, studying the wolf's face by flashlight. The scars told a story. They weren't from fights with other wolves or accidents in the wild. They were burn marks, old and healed, running down the left side of Gray's face and neck. Stevens suddenly remembered a rescue operation from 6 years earlier. A massive wildfire had swept through this same region, forcing evacuation of campers and wildlife alike. During that chaotic week, Stevens and his team had encountered a wolf pup, badly burned and separated from his pack. The pup had been too injured to survive in the wild, so Stevens had made the controversial decision to provide emergency care. For 2 weeks, he'd nursed the young wolf back to health, treating his burns and ensuring he was strong enough to return to the wilderness. The pup had distinctive markings, and now, looking at Gray, Stevens realized he was seeing that same wolf, fully grown. Gray wasn't just any wolf. He was a wolf that Stevens had once saved. And now Gray had returned the favor, saving a human life. The revelation hit Stevens like a physical blow. All this time, Gray had been branded as a dangerous predator, blamed for attacks he likely hadn't committed. The truth was that this scarred wolf had developed an unusual understanding of humans through his early rescue experience. Gray didn't see humans as prey or enemies. He saw them as creatures capable of both kindness and vulnerability. As Jack was loaded onto a rescue sled for transport to the nearest medical facility, Gray emerged from the shadows one final time. The wolf approached Stevens directly, something wild animals simply don't do. For a moment, Wolf and Ranger faced each other in recognition. Stevens slowly extended his hand, and incredibly, Gray allowed the human to briefly touch his scarred face. "Thank you, old friend," Stevens whispered. Gray seemed to understand. The wolf stepped back, gave one final look at the unconscious hiker being carried away, and disappeared into the forest. Jack would make a full recovery from his hypothermia, though he'd lose 2 toes to frostbite, a small price for his life. When doctors told him how close he'd come to death, Jack was stunned to learn about his unexpected savior. "A wolf saved me?" Jack asked, hardly believing the story. But the evidence was undeniable. Gray's fur was found on Jack's clothing. The wolf's paw prints circled the area where Jack had been found. Most conclusively, thermal analysis of Jack's body showed heat patterns consistent with prolonged contact with another warm-blooded creature. The story spread quickly through the local community and beyond. The wolf that had been feared and hunted was revealed to be a hero. Calls for Gray's removal or elimination were replaced with demands for his protection. Jack, once recovered, became Gray's most vocal advocate. He returned to the forest multiple times, hoping to catch a glimpse of the wolf who had saved his life. On one occasion, he spotted Gray watching from a distant ridge, and the two beings, human and wolf, simply acknowledged each other across the wilderness. The livestock attacks that had been blamed on Gray were eventually traced to a pack of younger wolves that had moved into the territory from the north. Trail cameras confirmed Gray's innocence and revealed his true nature, a solitary guardian of his domain, protecting it from threats rather than creating them. Ranger Stevens often reflects on the extraordinary chain of events that connected him to Gray across 6 years. A simple act of compassion toward an injured pup had created a bond that ultimately saved a human life. "We think we understand the natural world," Stevens says, "but it's far more complex and beautiful than we imagine." Gray didn't save Jack because he was trained or domesticated. He saved him because somewhere in his wolf soul, he remembered kindness and chose to repay it. Today, Gray still roams the Montana wilderness, though he's now protected by law and monitored by conservation groups. Hikers occasionally report glimpses of the scarred wolf, and his legend has transformed from one of fear to one of hope. Jack has become an advocate for wolf conservation, sharing his story to help people understand these misunderstood predators. He often says that Gray didn't just save his life, he changed his entire perspective on the relationship between humans and wildlife. The forest where it all happened is now known locally as Gray's Territory, and a small memorial plaque has been placed near the tree where Jack was found. It reads, "In recognition of the bond between species and the power of compassion to transcend all boundaries." But perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is what it reveals about the capacity for mercy in the natural world. Gray had every reason to avoid humans, given how he'd been treated. Instead, he chose to save one. Sometimes the most profound acts of heroism come from the most unexpected sources. Sometimes the creatures we fear the most are the ones capable of the greatest compassion. Do you think animals remember kindness? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories.